Hey, welcome everybody. This is our webinar series called What You Need to Know About. And today's discussion is about talent management in small and growing businesses. We are really excited to welcome two experts to share their perspectives and what they've learned about this topic. And before we jump into that, I'm just going to give an overview of what we're talking about today and about the report that coincides with this webinar. So, yeah, just a few notes. This meeting's being recorded and made available on the Andy website after we are finished. Keep yourself muted for the beginning, but it is a small group, so I really encourage you to just unmute at any point once we're actually in the discussion and ask a follow-up question. You can also ask questions in the chat. So we're here because Andy just released a series of what we're calling evidence syntheses, which is a series of literature reviews summarizing the mostly academic and then also a little bit outside of that as well, evidence on these key topics that keep coming up in the SGB sector, meaning the small and growing business sector. We've heard a lot of questions from practitioners about the best ways to cultivate entrepreneurial ecosystems, implement talent management strategies in SGBs, and then also to make sure that decent work is being integrated into SGBs as best as we can. And so we wanted to make sure that practitioners, instead of having to comb through all of the research, had something like this, about 15 to 20 page report where they could get up to speed on all of the research and see what it meant for their work very quickly. So that's the purpose of these, and we wanted to partner each of these reports with a conversation with experts on the topic to go a little bit deeper, hear from the personal perspective about what the research is saying and how they're approaching their work accordingly. So just to sort of set the stage, some of the key findings from this literature review, and again, there was no primary research. This was summarizing existing research. So things that came out were that SGBs, which we talk sort of about SMEs and SGBs interchangeably. SGBs do refer to those smaller and very high growth oriented firms within the SME segment, but most of the research is on SMEs. So you'll hear me go kind of back and forth. But in general, SGBs, SMEs, they face unique talent management constraints compared to larger companies. Despite these constraints, they can implement talent management practices that contribute to growth. Some of those we mentioned in the study. And then also there is a significant knowledge gap regarding best practices for talent management in SGBs specifically. There's a lot on larger companies, a lot less on smaller companies regarding, within the research. And then also there's a lot focused on Europe and the US, and I've found very little in developing economies. And I realized that some of you may not have seen this report yet. So let me, actually, Vicki, maybe you could help me by sharing in the chat the link to the report. I'm sure it's easy for everybody to find and read after this webinar. And apologies if you hear the ambulance outside my window. Okay, so I want to turn it now to our panelists, but first I'll give a quick introduction to both of them. And I'm so appreciative that you both were able to join us. It's really a pleasure to have experts speak with us about these topics. So first is Dr. Catalina Harsch. She is the customer service lead at Bluequist, an HR tech startup company in Berlin. In her role, she supports organizations in using the full potential of their employees and contributes to the validation and further development of the product with her research activities. In addition, she is an affiliated researcher for the Talent Management Institute at ESCP Europe, the Berlin campus. Her main research focuses on talent management from different angles, concentrating on various working environments. So she is very much an expert in talent management, where I've found her because she was one of the co-authors in one of the reports that we were citing heavily in the lit review. So I'm very grateful she's here. And also Carrie Nasadai is the talent practice lead and a project leader at Open Capital, a Pan-African management consulting and financial advisory firm. She has over 6 years of experience leading and working in teams to provide investment advisory and strategy consulting for high growth startups, SMEs, investors, and corporations. As the talent practice lead, Carrie's one of the co-developers of OCA's, Open Capital Advisors, talent diagnostic tool, and has provided targeted support to various companies to help assess their talent management systems, develop and implement practical solutions. So obviously we're very grateful Carrie's here. I actually haven't learned a ton yet about the talent diagnostic toolkit. So Carrie, I'm really excited to hear what you've learned through that process and how you approach that. So let me see. And yeah, thank you, Vicki. You linked to the report on the chat. Okay, so I will stop my screen share now. And I think I can pin, see if I can pin multiple people to the screen. Oh, nice. Okay. I think I can pin myself too. Hey, this is fun. Okay, so now shifting into my questions. I wanted to start with just understanding what is talent management. So when we set out to start writing this report, we were, I just assumed talent management was sort of like human resources management, and it was sort of all in the same. It was kind of just like a new catchy term. But as I started reading, I realized, oh no, this is different. And it has a specific definition. So I wanted to start with Catalina, if you would be willing to share, like, how do you define talent management and how does it differ from regular HR management?
Thank you very much for having me today. What is talent management? So I'm researching talent management. I think now it's 7 years now, and talent management includes the attraction, identification, development, and retention of talent. But what is talent? This is the big question, and this is a really difficult question. Where also in research, there is not only one opinion. So what talent means. So we have two main approaches. I think this is the biggest dispute. So we have an inclusive approach to talent, which means that everyone can be a talent. So everyone in the organization is a talent. So talent management practices should really address all the employees. And we have an exclusive approach, which says, okay, only people in strategic positions of the organizations are talents. Yeah. So the question is, okay, what is the right approach? Is there a right or wrong? And in research, we always say it depends. And so we have these two approaches to talent. So what talent really means. And now you also asked the question, what is the difference to human resource management? This could be one difference. So when it comes to the exclusive approach, only focusing on a specific group of people. So this is one difference. But when it comes to the inclusive approach, what is then the difference? There are many more differences between human resource management and talent management, as talent management is more strategic, and then human resource management, and also is not focusing on administration of employees. So I think this is the main difference. And what else? Also, I think also talent management has a broader scope compared to human resource management in terms of focusing on topics such as organizational culture, also what means leadership, for example, within an organization. So yeah, I think these are the main differences between human resource management.
Yeah, no, that was very well said, and I actually learned something new just now with the inclusive and the exclusive. Something else I was reading is that it puts emphasis on sort of identifying which employees should progress into higher level roles within the organization, and sort of like not just keeping talent as in avoiding employees leaving the job,
Yeah.
but also retaining talent such that they can grow into the next position. And I thought that was interesting. Is that sort of part of the way that you both think about that as well?
Carrie, you want to go first?
Sure. I think I fully agree with everything that you said. And I think when in my experience learning about talent, I think when we think about human resource, or human resources, HR, I think there is a bias or a focus on how can we maximize, and it's terrible wording, but how can we maximize the utility of this person for the organization? While with talent, there's so much more to that. It's yes, how do we make sure that the employee, that we've recruited, that we're bringing, is well positioned to support the operations of the business? But talent management is so much about, okay, how can we grow this person? How do we support them? How do we bring in the right individual so that they're well positioned to perform well in this role? So so I think that's also, as Katharina said, it's also the difference between IC, HR, and talent is really talent management just broadens the scope and has more of a focus on, how can we support the individuals that are on our team?
Yeah, that intersects so clearly with our next topic for tomorrow's webinar, which is on job quality. So that's really that's a really helpful explanation. So back to you, Catalina. I'm curious. So in your research, it seems like there's a lot of differentiation between talent management in this small and growing enterprise, more of this entrepreneurial size firm, compared to a large enterprise. And how I want to hear from you, and then Carrie as well, how you think about the difference between talent management based on size of firm.
Yeah, so talent management is really context dependent, and there's no one size fits all approach to talent management. And of course, the context of a large enterprise is totally different compared to a smaller organization and to a smaller and fast growing business. So, and SMEs are not a scaled down version of large companies. So they're totally different. And you also can see it in the talent management of these smaller organizations. So they're often following the inclusive approach to talent. And the larger companies often follow more than exclusive approach to talent. Also, the measures are taken are more reactive, and it's like a firefighting mentality. And we need something, we need a training here. Okay, let's do this. And so it's more dynamic and more individualized approaches. And in large companies, you often see the approaches are well structured. You have processes, you have talent programs, you have really nice designed assessment centers for selecting the right talents for a job position, but also for talent development programs. And as larger companies really have more resources to do so, not only financially, but also know-how. They have man-women power. And so this is a little bit difficult in smaller organizations. And I think these are the reasons for the main differences you see. So in smaller organizations, you have hands-on measures, you have really innovative approaches. So in my research, I talked to many startup companies, but also to large enterprises. And it was a study about how talent management can improve the agility of the organization. And this was really interesting because here you have two totally different approaches. And we saw that in smaller organizations, for example, one company stated, for us, we want that our talents can apply easily. So they can apply for a job via WhatsApp. And so it's a messenger. And so this was pretty cool. And within a larger organization, I think this is not possible. And so they have creative approaches to talent management. Also, often the team is more involved. So in the selection process to make the decision who gets hired, but also when it comes to development. So I saw in a few companies that the team decides who's going on a training and what kind of training is important for the team. So the team makes a decision, and it's not only the manager or HR who makes a decision here, as it is the case in larger companies. And yeah, so here just a few examples. Carrie, maybe in your work you have much more examples here.
I think that really resonates. And I think it's such an interesting point that you've brought about, where there is so much flexibility that we see with small and growing businesses. However, the resource constraint that you highlighted is also a really big factor. So you also see that, especially when people are on their talent management journey, they really focus on, what we discussed in the first few minutes around HR. So they're doing it for compliance. They're figuring out what are like the basic talent pieces I need to do to get by. And typically it's like, regulatory compliance bits, focusing on compensation, because, that is one of the biggest factors that we see a lot of people concerned about in terms of talent management. And then now as we grow, or as those organizations grow, that's when they start considering, how else can we attract or retain employees. And I think that's where the flexibility that you're talking about comes in. And it's interesting, like that's the difference I'm talking about, is maybe an organization at 5 employees, but when they get to like 10, 15 employees, that's when the change happens. So still very young, very small, but it's interesting to see that trajectory as they continue to grow and scale.
Yeah, thank you. Even Andy as an organization, for those of you who are familiar with us, we've grown from, I've seen us grown from about 7 or 8 people to being like, 40 or 50 now. And these points all resonate from my experience with Andy. A follow-up question to that is, in the, there is a study or two that we're talking about the role that sort of organizational culture and also the mindset or philosophy of the founder have on small companies, and like the talent management strategy can be very impacted by this individual. Do you see that as like a positive or negative, or is that something? Yeah, I'm just curious what you think about that, if you've seen that, and if it has implications for the quality of talent management. Either one of you wants to share.
Okay, so maybe my answer is more from a research perspective. So yeah, it depends. So in theory, we have 2 approaches to talent management or to human resource management. So it's called best fit versus best practice approach. And as I said in the beginning, I'm convinced that talent management is really context dependent. And so I think we should follow here the best fit approach, and it's based on the contingency theory. So that means that you should align your talent management practices to your context in order to be effective. And when you are in a small organization, the context is really shaped by the founder, by the CEO. So in terms of organizational culture, leadership style, and so on and so forth. So for this reason, I would say it's good that talent management follows the philosophy of the leader or the CEO, because then it can be effective, because then it fits the context. But on the other hand, talent management are often subject to biases. And in these terms, I would say, it really depends. So it starts how talent is defined. So who or what is the talent in our organization? Yeah, and this means which characteristics, competencies, values make up talent. And if you only have here one view, so maybe this view is also biased. When you think about, it's called projection error, so that people which are similar to yourself are more interesting, sympathetic, and are viewed better. And this is a normal bias, yeah. And when you have this bias in your talent definition, and then also in your talent management processes when it comes to selection, but also when it comes to development, so who's allowed to develop further, and what topics or what content is in the trainings and stuff like this, then it could be problematic, yeah. So yeah, so really it depends to follow the philosophy of one person.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, and maybe to give two examples where, you know, in one scenario, there was a CEO, a founder who was very interested in all things talent, which was great to hear because he was very intentional about the talent management systems at his organization. What was interesting is this actually didn't turn out to be a good thing, unfortunately. Or so he was really interested and had done a lot of research on talent management. But you know, as Abby had mentioned, a lot of the information you find online isn't geared to the developing world context. So he had taken a talent management system or organizational structure system called holacracy. So it was made famous by Zappos, one of these American startup which scaled really fast and is doing really well. And he was trying to apply it locally. So while it was really great, there are all these studies, etc., but he therefore didn't really translate it to his local context. So it ended up being a barrier to talent progression in his organization, yet he did come out with the best intentions. On the flip side, I've also seen scenarios where the CEO is very hesitant about talent and feels like it's very abstract, etc. So we do meet like HR managers who have such a hard time making the case for any investment into talent management systems. And you see that for them, it really becomes an uphill battle because they have to find proof points or data points to be able to, you know, fight for each and every even small idea that they want to put in place. So I definitely agree that the CEO definitely shapes the talent agenda in an organization, but definitely a tricky balance between, you know, being interested in it, but also being open enough to learn, to think intentionally about how to apply it to their own context is also really important.
Yeah, that was a big knowledge gap we identified, was both, you know, the focus on smaller firms, but then especially in basically anywhere outside the US and Europe. A lot was in Europe. I think there's a lot of focus in Europe on like job quality and talent. So, you know, which is awesome, but there needs to now be a lot more in other contexts. So we can, you know, see what's specific about each country and region and setting. So I was curious, I don't want to miss an opportunity, Carrie, to hear about the talent diagnostic toolkit, just because I haven't heard of a lot of things like this. And so I just really briefly, if you want to share like why you came up with that, how, and yeah, how it's working for SGBs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so as you mentioned, there's not a lot of information out there on small and growing businesses, and there are not a lot of tailored solutions for small and growing businesses. So you find these businesses coming up where they do realize that talent is an issue. You know, it's very clear that talent influences the sustainability of your business, your ability to attract investment, your ability to grow, all these different things. And I think the founders, the CEOs, the senior management we spoke to as part of our work as Open Capital always highlighted that as a challenge, but you could also feel them being overwhelmed. They didn't know where to start. They didn't know what resources were out there. They couldn't find anything affordable. And yeah, it just it just felt like there needed to be some sort of solution in the market that was, one, time efficient, in a way that, because their hands are really tied with all other priorities. Two, economically efficient, so that, we know SGBs are resource constrained. So how can they tap into something that will help them, but not, strain them? And then two, something that just helps demystify talent for them. So with that, and actually through the support of the Agidias Foundation and Andy, we developed the talent diagnostic tool. Basically, it's a completely free online and offline tool that you can find on our website, where SGBs can sign up and basically take a free survey that assesses their talent management systems across 6 different talent areas. So with that, we kind of looked at, back to what Katerina mentioned, talent is around identification, recruitment, but also the development once they are in your organization. So what we realized is, at least locally, there was a growing view around the identification and recruitment. And the biggest gap was, once these individuals are in your organization, what should happen? So things like, you need to have defined career paths. You need to have an organizational structure, a performance management system, think about engagement, culture, etc. So those are the areas that our diagnostic tool focuses on. So it takes about like 10 minutes for them to take. You get your results immediately. And these are benchmarked against other SGBs in your region. Which I think is particularly important, because we always see everybody scores lowly on compensation. I think the average compensation score is like 40 out of 100, but you realize that if you have 45, you are slightly above the average. So it's also good to understand how are your peers doing in these different areas. And that also gives you more guidance on how you should prioritize your interventions in different areas. And then with that, we also have talent tools, which are just like quick summaries of, let's say you want to make improvements around your organizational culture. Like, here's a quick like how to in terms of best practices, like what are considerations you should take. Here's a case study of how someone did it, etc. Really, that like, we want the tool to be a stepping stone for them to be like, okay, talent isn't this crazy monster that I don't even know how to approach. Let's start off with this, and then we can go from there. Yeah, so that's basically how it works. Yeah.
Thanks. I really appreciate that, because there, like I said, we didn't come across a ton, that was specific to SMEs, SGBs, and especially not outside of Europe and the US. So I'm actually gonna, just in case anyone wants to see more, I to be honest, I didn't realize it was free. So this is a fantastic resource, and I put it in the chat for anyone who's curious. So I have some more questions, but I want to pause and see if there's anything from our audience, meeting participants. Since this is a small group, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, to put in the chat. But yeah, I would love to hear any questions that have come up from this conversation, or from reading the report, or just questions that you've had in general about talent management. I'll give everyone another few seconds, and then I'll ask a question if there isn't one.
So Carrie, it's really interesting what you are doing, and I think to have this data is so helpful, because I think we should really more often include data in our decision, and to really see how others are doing in talent management. To have this benchmark is really helpful. And you also said you have some, you provide some support to really improve the talent management. What are you doing there?
Yeah, so typically how it works is, So we want them to use this talent diagnostic tool as a first step. So it gives them an assessment of like, this is your performance across these different talent areas. So if, you know, they have the internal capacity, we have provided those tools that I mentioned that hopefully they can go through, kind of understand what to do and take it from there. But if not, you know, we want to be there because based on our experience to kind of share back tips and tricks that they can do. So typically it goes similar to a consulting engagement. So I can give an example. We had a restaurant here in Kenya that was really struggling with high turnover. So they, you know, they were just concerned, they feel like they're doing everything right, but people keep leaving. And what the CEO highlighted was she thought that the reason was because of compensation. And so we were like, okay, that makes sense. You know, you are a small company, but let's just do this holistic assessment to figure out what the challenge is. So we did the talent diagnostic, followed up with additional consultations with the team. And what we realized actually was that within the organization, she did not have substantial performance management systems. So the employees felt like, we really like the organization, but I don't see my growth. I don't see my future here. And, you know, while she was hiring people pretty young, they were growing in the company, but getting to a place where even in their personal lives, they had more responsibilities. They had more of that desire to feel acknowledged for their work, but weren't getting that at the organization. And there wasn't really that outlet to share it with the CEO. So once we provided that feedback that this is a challenge, now from there, we developed a performance management system tailored to their organization. And, you know, back to your idea about inclusive and exclusive, you know, sometimes I think also the challenge with information we find online is that it's also very focused on knowledge workers. So people who are very strategic, who are providing, you know, that technical support, but, you know, there are people who are providing more of that manual work who still need those different support systems. So what we came in was providing a performance management system that was tailored to their team and the kind of work that they were doing. So that's just an example of some of the additional support we provide. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Catalina, for that question. And Carrie, I appreciated you bringing up, you know, outside of the knowledge worker world, because you're right. Most of the research does seem to be focused very much around as sort of the tech-based businesses and the knowledge workers and et cetera. So there's a few questions that have come in now in the chat. So the first one is from Cecile. Says, are there good examples of support provided to SGBs by entrepreneur support organizations specifically on talent management? So I guess this is a little bit like, so you've been talking about the talent diagnostic toolkit, but like outside of that, maybe just OCA work with like other ESOs to provide that support or give guidance? Because it's a good question, because I work a lot with like accelerators and incubators, and there's a lot of questions around helping entrepreneurs get the right people on board and keep them. But outside of things like this toolkit, what have you seen? And I guess, Carrie, I'd be curious to start with you as part of the Andy community.
Yeah, and could you confirm just what the acronym ESO means?
I believe it refers here to entrepreneur support organization. So capacity development provider, business support organization. Yeah, there's so many different acronyms for that same thing.
Yeah. Good examples of support provided to SGBs by ESOs. I would say, in my experience, there haven't been many that are specifically focused on talent management. I think you do see things like accelerators coming up, which do have some portion of talent management. I think you see a lot of venture studios coming up. So like Antler, which recently launched its operations in Kenya, which does have an emphasis on, yes, you have this idea, but also do you have the team in place, and how are your team members working together to support the business and each other? But I will say it's mostly embedded in other large scale support, but there are very few other companies I've seen focused on talent. I think in Africa, we have Africa Management Institute, which is also an ANDI member, which is also doing really good work. We have Amani Institute, which is more focused on training. So I think there's a little bit here and there. I would say the major challenge is kind of cost and also, yeah, like their range of experience across different regions.
Yeah, thank you. And I do want to plug, like, the diagnostic toolkit is free. So that could be something that ESOs take and help their entrepreneurs take the assessment and then use that as a starting point to figure out where there's gaps to fill. So, and Catalina, sorry, I haven't given you, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add from your experience. I don't know if the startup you work with, works with any support organization.
No, not really, but what I think is often really helpful and important to really use your own network and to talk to other startups and really to exchange ideas and also to work together when it comes, for example, for development. Yeah, so you can share costs. You can decide on topics together, what is important, so that also your employees have the chance to build up a network and and to also have the opportunity to receive, for example, training and development. So this is really helpful to really use the network and or build up a network where you can work together.
And that's an obvious, I think, area where, like, say, an accelerator or an incubator could play a role in making sure that startups have the chance to talk with one another and feel like it's a safe space to do so.
Yeah.
Let's see, we had another question, which was sort of related to, supporting entrepreneurs and developing talent management strategies. But I think you both mentioned, they're so resource and time constrained. Have you seen, like, how do you sort of convince an entrepreneur that this is something to prioritize, or when they're in the small, the early stages of their company, that this is important? Or do you feel like they realize it and they just haven't put the right words around it? Like, yeah, I'm curious, is this a priority already for SGBs? And if not, how do we, encourage them to make it a priority?
Okay, Carrie, do you want to go first?
No,
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. What I experienced in my research, so I did qualitative research, and I had many interviews with different HR people, also from startup and also fast-growing startups, and it was really interesting because they often said, "Yeah, but we don't have this talent management." And when I asked deeper, of course they do have their talent management. They have this strategic positions within the organization, and this position needs to be filled. The people needs to be developed, and so on and so forth. They just don't call it talent management because often. Maybe it's a Europe thing, or I don't know. When you hear the term talent management, everyone is thinking about these structured talent management programs where you have to do this and that training, and then you climb up the career ladder another step, and then you have to do the next step, and so on and so forth. But this is not only talent management. So talent management is about the attraction, the identification, the development, and the retention. And this is also a really important part of people for strategic positions within the organization. And so, yeah, I think they know it's important, but in my experience, they often don't call it talent management. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I think even for Open Capital, when we were starting our talent management practice, we knew it would kind of be an uphill battle. So we also did focus on like, what's the, what's going to get our foot in the door. So I remember initially we were like, you know what, everybody will follow money. And we were like, let's engage investors first of all, and then investors will, provide the pressure onto these SGBs, and then they'll be interested in talent. And, investors, yes, do talk a good talk about how talent is important. But at the end of the day, I think also there's so many factors that go into an investment decision that, talent will be a concern, but I don't think it's in my experience been the straw that, broke the back of an investment deal. And what we realized was more effective was actually speaking to the HR managers. So like the people who are actually in an organization, because that's their role, and they're actually committed to creating improved environments for the teams. And as Katerina has mentioned, it's like when you speak to them, you do realize that they do have talent management systems. And I think it's also just about empowering them a little bit more. And that's why I think the peer networks that you are mentioning are so valuable, because they are given an opportunity to learn from each other. They're given an opportunity to see, okay, this is how this intervention worked out at my organization. And look, now my turnover is down. Or look at now my employees are so much happier. Like, let me try this, let me try that. So I think it's difficult to definitely convince entrepreneurs about it, but I think making sure the right stakeholders are involved is really the crux of it. And it's usually senior management, the HR managers, who really drive talent in an organization. Yeah.
Thank you both. So we have time for one more question, and Bijan, I think you wanted to ask. Yes. Hi.
Hi, thanks so much. And I joined late, but the reason was that I saw this event on Twitter and I dropped a call and joined because I think it's so important. I'm the new CEO of Atlas Core, and I just joined in September, and we focus on global talent development. We bring people to the US and place them in organizations, and a lot of them go back and work in smaller companies, which is really intriguing to me to think about talent and how we help them be placed. One of the things, I have so many questions, but the most important one is, how have you considered, and I just skimmed the report, the new role of blended work? So what difference does it make that people might not have to be in person, and how that impacts smaller organizations as well? And both as an opportunity or as a challenge, because, for example, we've placed fellows with SAP and they work globally, but it creates all kinds of challenges with different time zones and so on that you're all well aware of. So any considerations on that from your side and from the research?
So maybe not the research perspective, but I also work for a startup company, and we are working totally remote. So we are placed in different locations. So I sit in Berlin in Germany, but we have employees also in other countries and also with different time zones. So I think for smaller companies, it's first of all a really great opportunity to attract talent to the organization, because for me as an employee, it's really comfortable. Yeah, so I can visit, for example, my family in the south of Germany, and I can work from there, or I can go to another country. Yeah, I can follow the sun and live as a digital nomad or whatever, and have my great job. And so I think this is a big opportunity for smaller companies to really attract talent to the organization. Of course, there are challenges, and with the different time zones, and to get to know each other only by a screen, and to schedule meetings. But I think it's possible, and I think it's worth it to organize it like this.
Yeah, interesting question. Yeah, I think there are so many angles to look at, and I think, as both of you has mentioned, there are definitely benefits to it. Yeah, in terms of like attracting a diverse team, allowing people working from the comforts of their home. I think with that, there just has to be like a lot of supporting talent infrastructure to it. So one, when you're in the office, there's so many things that you can, and I think particularly around culture and engagement. When you're in the office, there's so much teams have invested around, creating or being intentional about that culture. For example, even at our office, we had an open space working area with just encourage people to interact quite more. Those are kitchen space where people could just like kind of make noise and stuff. But now when everybody is, back at home, all you're seeing is this screen. I can tell you, this is the second time today I've put my camera on. The rest people were just seeing my name. There is a lot that can get lost in terms of, the personal interaction and engagement. And even, I do think when you are at the office, it removes you from your home situation and kind of places people on an equal playing field. So for example, one of the challenges, or not challenges, but interesting dynamics we had is, I don't know how many of you have worked in Nairobi, but depending on where you live, your internet connectivity and your electrical connectivity is really tricky. So while for one party it can be totally easy for them to work from home, another party it can be quite different. So I think while all that blended working is great, I think there is more emphasis on how do you ensure everybody has the right working environment, and then how do you support engagement and culture even when there is not a lot of personal interaction. Yeah.
Thank you both. And one thing I'll just add to finish that off and address Nicole's question about, working in a team that's multicultural. Andy has a, interest. We've had a team based in Washington, D.C. and a team based in our regional chapters throughout the world since the very beginning. And so that's being both multicultural and in various time zones and virtual has been something we've dealt with for a long time. And I'll just say, I think it's important for an organization to recognize what are the cost savings from people working from home. And instead of just saying, okay, that's more, for the business, can we allocate some of those, that we're not paying in rent or whatever, to actually bring people together? Because something I found from Andy is that when we're brought together even once a year, it totally changes the dynamic in the way that we email and we chat and everything. But once you have that face-to-face, even once a year, it's amazing what you can do when you have enough, space to have informal conversations with your colleagues. So I'll just do that because I know we're running out of time. But thank you both so much. I learned so much, and I think all of our participants probably did too. And just appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedules to join us and share your insights. So we will post this video on the Andy website. And if there's any questions for myself or our panelists, please, send us an email and I'll make sure to reach out and get some answers to your questions. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This was a great discussion, and thank you for the great questions. So
yes, thank you.
It was cool to think about it and discuss it with you. So and also for your insights, Carrie. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure meeting all of you. Yeah, and it went so fast. I was like, what?
I did. I tried the 45-minute webinar to see if we could get through it quickly. So it was fun. It was kind of rapid fire, so I enjoyed it. So I'll let you both get back to your, I'm sure, very busy days.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining.